us today. I would like to welcome Pearl Cicci, plant-based nutritionalist and health and fitness coach. And what's so incredible about her is that she also is doing a Reels challenge right now. So if you want to follow her, her handle is at Pearl Cicci. You can check out all of her very creative ways to encourage you to eat healthy through plant-based eating and encourage all those feel-good vibes. Her passion lies in educating people to take care of their bodies and working with entrepreneurs to increase their energy levels and optimize their health through plant-based eating. I always feel so motivated every time I see her, and I'm so excited for you guys to also share in this as well. Please welcome our next speaker, Pearl Cicci. Welcome, Pearl.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Rachel, and everyone at the Yoga and Health Expo today. I'm so happy to be here. I'm super, super excited. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Pearl Cicci. Like she said, I'm a plant-based nutritionist, health coach, and fitness coach. And I also have a passion for dance fitness, which is something that I just started recently this year. And it's just been a really great way for me to get moving and help other people move during a time when things are closed and also have that group aspect. Before I dive into things, I want to ask, how long have we been sitting for? I want to do a movement breaks. I think it's so important to move our bodies and get moving and grooving. So just for a couple minutes, we're going to stand up. Everyone's going to stand up out of their seats, out of their chairs. Everyone see me? I'll go up here. All right. And we're just going to move. So just like shake it out. We're just going to shake. We're going to move. We're just going to groove, hands up in the air and bring them down and up and then down. Nice. Up and then down, great, up, down, two more, up, and then down, and we're gonna shake in a circle. We're gonna shake, 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 good, circle, go around, amazing, amazing. Just a really quick movement break. People always ask me, what's the best way to increase your energy levels? And there's so many different ways, but the most efficient and the quickest thing is to move your body. I hope you all joined me and did that with me. And for those of you that might be asking or questioning, like, why I'm not wearing one of the t-shirts from the Yoga Expo, I'm currently in Nicaragua. I moved for a little bit from Vancouver, so I didn't get a t-shirt. So that's okay, we're here, we're ready to go. And I just want to talk about a couple of things I'll be talking about today. There will be time for Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, pop in the chat and or just remember them. And then you can ask me at the end. I really like things to be more interactive. So I'm going to be asking you to drop some things in the chat, share some things with me, because I don't like just speaking at a screen. And I can't see anyone's beautiful faces other than Rachel's, but that's okay. I know you're there and I'm really grateful you're here for my segment. So I'm going to be talking about plant-based eating and ways to make it really approachable and just seamless with your lifestyle. There's a lot of things that come up with people when it comes to plant-based eating, and that's why I help coach people through to making that transition smooth, effortless, seamless, and with least resistance, right? Because when we want to build new habits, the path of least resistance is the way to go. So I just want to share a little bit about my plant-based journey. When I was younger, living with my parents, I didn't really ever like eating meat, actually. I always only ate a little bit, or I'd try it, and I was like not like a huge fan of all the meats we'd have. So once I moved out of home, I realized like, oh, I don't really have a desire or a craving to need to eat meat. So I decided to cut out meat. And because I was studying dietetics, I was studying nutrition, I understood the value of plant-based foods and nutrients and all the different benefits they provide us with. And then I was able to just, build my own kind of lifestyle and eating habits around the knowledge I knew. So my transition was pretty easy in terms of just really gravitating towards more plant-based foods. And I realized that it was a big difference in my energy levels, how I showed up, my skin clearing, how I felt every day. It just felt really good to me. I do want to clarify one thing between being vegan and plant-based. Actually, does anyone want to drop in the chat if you know the difference between plant-based and veganism? Anyone want to take a guess? Well, no guests in the chat just yet, but that is okay. I will move on. So the difference, and this is my perception, this is my conception of it from my experience, from working with people, from my knowledge, what I've done research on. Basically, plant-based eating is more of an umbrella term for various different diets that encompass eating more plants and plant-based eating. So if you were to ask a bunch of different nutritionists what plant-based eating is, you might get different responses, and that's totally okay. There's no right or wrong. So basically, certain diets, such as people can argue the Mediterranean diet will be plant-based, the vegan diet will be plant-based, vegetarian diet, pescatarian even. But for me, I really define it as having a diet or your intake that is 80% or more that's made up of whole food plant-based items, right? So 80% or more, and the 20% really is up to you in fluctuation because everyone's different. And I really allow people to have that flexibility and to explore the things that actually feels better for them. So if they still include certain animal products or certain, high quality proteins in their diet that makes them feel good and that's okay with them, and that's okay. But it doesn't mean you have to be 100% vegan. If you do choose to be, that's totally fine. But if you don't, that's totally fine too, right? My main approach is just to get more plants into your body and whatever that looks like for you in the way that you enjoy and in the way that still allows you to live your life, have experiences, go out to eat with the family. Because there's a big aspect of food that's not just the nutrients, the biological level. It's also community building. It's, relationships, it's culture, and having people work with that within their lifestyle looks different for everyone. I just want to share that difference. And then with veganism, of course, veganism is people that are 100% vegan, no animal products at all. There's a little spectrum there. Some people, choose to still eat eggs or honey or not at all. So there's a little spectrum there too. And also I find that a lot of vegans are also very into the they don't buy leather and they don't buy it's a lifestyle where nothing that they consume or use for the most part would they try their best to not have any animal products in their environment. And that's a great approach too. I think people can take what they like and leave what they don't from any of these approaches. So I want to share that difference. So when I talk about plant-based eating, keep that in mind. There's a few main things I'm going to share and a few principles that I like to propose to people just to make it a little more approachable. So the first one would be the balanced plate model. Now, have any of you heard of the balanced plate model? If you have, drop a yes in the chat. Let me know if you heard of the balanced plate model. Quiet crowd today, quiet crowd. I'm very used to having people chatting in the chat and dropping a lot of things, but if you don't want to, that's okay. Yes, you have, Jason. Thank you for dropping in the chat. I'm like, is anyone actually there? Because everyone's cameras are off. Maybe people are just like away from the camera. No, I'm kidding. So yes, Jason has heard the balanced plate model. And basically what that looks like is imagine a round plate and half of that plate would be composed of your vegetables and or fruits. So you're mostly plant-based, like leafy vegetables, fruits. The 1/4 of your plate, so the other quarter, if you're visualizing that, it would be your starches or grains. So your rice, your potatoes, your quinoa, whatever starch you prefer or grain. And then the other quarter would be your protein. So your protein of choice, whether it's plant-based proteins or animal-based proteins. So that's kind of the idea of the balanced plate model. And this really emphasizes the idea that you want to have half your plate consisting of more plants, right? Vegetables and fruits. This is the first step that I usually encourage my clients to do, is to just try and eat more plants, eat more vegetables. And this is at every meal of the day. Now, of course, not every meal is going to look like exactly like the plate model where you have your divisions and the halves, and people don't eat like that. We're not robots, but it's a very good visualization of what it could look like if you were to incorporate more plants into your meals, into your plates. So whenever you're making food or thinking of things, like always ask yourself, how can I add more plants to this, or how can I make this more nutritious, right? And then thinking of that. And the idea of having this balanced plate model, this ties into a couple of things that come up with certain people that transition to plant-based eating, and they find that, oh, actually they're not eating that many vegetables. Sometimes things are quite starch heavy. Like I know a lot of people I worked with before, they went plant-based, but they were still eating like mac and cheese. Even though it was plant-based, it was vegan, they were eating like heavier things, lots of carbs, and they weren't having that portion of their foods that came from those plants. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, because this also ties into your satiation levels, how satisfied you are after a meal. If you're only eating mac and cheese. You're not going to be that full. You might not be having enough protein. That's a big one for many people, which I'll touch on. And you might not be having enough fiber, which also helps keep you satiated. And maybe you're not having healthy fats in there as well. That all comes into the combination of having that full feeling that's going to last you for more than a couple hours, right? That's one thing that comes up. People that they're hungry very shortly after their plant-based meals, and mostly because it's not balanced. So thinking of having all those components, the proteins, the healthy fats, the carbohydrates and or starches, and then your fruits and vegetables or your fibers, right? So that's a really good point. So keep that in mind too. And then when you think of blood sugar regulation, a really big idea behind health and our hormone releases and how things are just regulated in our body, insulin influences a lot of these things. And insulin is released when we eat things with sugar in them. And sugar is not bad. Sugar is just a natural energy source for our bodies, and it's found in almost every food. So carbohydrates, when we eat them, they get broken down into sugar, and this tends to cause our insulin to spike up. And that's a natural process. There's nothing wrong with that. Oftentimes, though, in society, people often eat unbalanced meals that are very high in carbohydrates and are not balanced. So having the up and down glucose spikes, the glucose roller coaster, I like to call it the blood sugar roller coaster, in the long term for our chronic health is actually not ideal, right? The more we can keep our glucose stable, our blood sugar stable, the better we have for our long-term health outcomes. So what this looks like, and it comes back to balanced eating, is that you want to ideally have most, if not all of your meals and or snacks. I say most because no one's perfect and you might have an unbalanced meal or snack here or there. That's okay, we are human, but most of the time you want to think of having that balance, because the combination of having your carbohydrate, your proteins, your fibers, and your fats, that actually helps you balance your blood sugars. So I always like to say that carbohydrates, fats, proteins, they're all best friends. They want to get separated. They want to hang out together. They want to be on the same plate together. So you want to think about that, because when you have that balance, it actually allows our blood glucose to stay more stable instead of spiking up and down. Does that make sense? Let me know if that made sense in the chat. That's basically how I break it down to people to make them understand that, hey, I want you to think about this, and this is how we're going to regulate our blood sugars as often as possible, because insulin has a big role in our other hormones that release our hunger cues, us hanging on to fat, right? Not being able to release certain fat in certain areas, and a lot of other balances, a lot of other functions that our body does. All right, thank you for the comment, Esther. So that's the first one, is the balanced eating. All right, hope that was clear. The next thing I want to propose, an idea that I really strongly believe works for many people, is the 80-20 rule. Now, the 80-20 rule, have any of you heard the 80-20 rule? Drop a yes in the chat if you have, or drop a no if you haven't. Yes, Lorianne, nice. I love that. Great, Rachel. Yep, love it. Great. So the 80-20 rule, actually originally it was based from the idea of time management, right? Like 80% of things that you're doing, I'm probably gonna get this wrong because I haven't reflected on the time management definition because I use it mostly in my practice, but it's from a productivity standpoint. But it's been kind of molded and taken to the health and wellness idea, because my take on it is that if you have about 80% of your foods that are, well balanced and eating healthy and clean and all the things that we've talked about, right? Having your proteins and carbohydrates and mostly whole foods, that is a really great proportion of your eating. 70-30 is okay too. We'll talk about that. And then the 20% is that wiggle room. It's that allowance that you are allowed to eat certain things that people would call bad or good. I don't really like to categorize foods as good or bad. I like to say, hey, sometimes this is more nutritious, sometimes this is less nutritious, right? Of course, 80% of the time, we want to eat things that are more nutritious. Of course, our whole foods, all those good stuff. But 20% of the time, if we eat things that are a little bit less nutritious, that's okay, because that allows you that room to enjoy foods, to go out for dinner, to have that birthday, to eat that cake. And this 80-20 rule really helps people alleviate the idea of food guilt. Do any of you struggle with food guilt? If you do, let me know in the chat, because this is something that you can maybe have a mindset shift around. Because when you give yourself the permission and when you allow yourself to say, hey, I've been eating pretty good. Maybe 70% or 80% of the time, I'm eating my greens, I'm eating my plants, like I'm feeling really good. And then 20% of the time, it's like I'm allowed to, like, give yourself that permission to enjoy that piece of pie or the cake and eat that with enjoyment and joy because you know you actually like this food without being like, oh, I shouldn't have had that. Oh my gosh, I was supposed to stay eating clean 100% of the time. But 100% or always eating clean is not realistic for anyone to do, right? Because again, we are communal beings. We're heavily influenced by our environment, by people around us, and that's totally fine. A lot of people come up to me like, oh, I went out and I end up eating some things, and oh man, it's like I didn't want to do that, but my friends offered it me and I couldn't say no. And it's all, but I do the same. I can relate because we are human beings and we actually have a inclination to want to be part of the tribe and to fit in. And that's an instinct. And it's very hard to override our instincts. So knowing that when you're in an environment with your friends and you're having a good time, you want to just have fun, and you might be more leaning towards, hey, I might have this sweet, my friend offered me the cookie, and that's totally okay. Like I went to a cafe a couple days ago and they had the best chocolate chip cookies, oh my gosh. And I had one because I was like, I want to try this cookie, and I enjoyed it because I know most of the time I'm eating really well. And this ties into the idea that you feel guilty often. People feel guilty when they're not eating balanced, when they're not eating well most of the time, right? Maybe it's a 50-50, or maybe it's like a 30-70, right? Depending on what your lifestyle currently is. And nothing wrong with that. It's really important to assess where you are without judgment and know what steps you need to take to improve that, right? So knowing that, it's like, okay, cool. I know that, but I want to make this a little better, but I'm still allowed to have that wiggle room. And the 80-20 rule is a really good practice. So if it's 70-30, that's okay too. If it's 90-10, I'm more of a 90-10 type of gal. I like to eat clean 90% of the time, and 10% of the time, I like to little dabble here and there. But having 100% expectations that you're always going to eat clean or be healthy or always eat plant-based is not realistic. And then you set yourself up for that failure, that disappointment, that negative self-talk, right? That brings you into that negative spiral of those thoughts. And that discourages you from keeping on a certain habit. In this case, would be healthy eating, right? So if that made sense with the 80-20 rule, and this is one that takes time to cultivate, takes time to remind yourself like, oh, it's okay. Like I have that, but it's really powerful. And a lot of my clients do really well and alleviate their food guilt because they know like they're humans, they're allowed to enjoy this, right? Exactly. Weekends are at home. Thank you for sharing that. It's true. So maybe you're 5 days during the week, you're doing well, you're at home, you're killing it. And then on the weekends, you might allow yourself to have that wiggle room. And that's what I do actually. During the week, I am on it. I'm prepped, I'm clean, I'm doing good, right? And then on the weekends, I allow myself to, but sometimes I don't. I also really encourage people to ask how they feel. Sometimes I'll go out with my friends and I actually don't want to have anything extra. I just like tune into myself. One thing I teach is intuitive eating. I'm not going to go into that on this call, but it's allows you to be like, hey, how am I feeling right now? Do I actually want to do this? Do I actually want to ingest this? How's my body feel right now? And then you ask yourself these questions and you tune in. It takes time to cultivate. It is a skill, right? And as you do that, you're like, okay, cool, I can do that. All right. So that's the second point. Amazing. And I'm just going to touch really briefly on a couple of things, and then we're going to have a little bit of time for Q&A. I ended up rambling more than I thought. Sorry, guys. But the last couple of things that come up when it comes to plant-based eating is the idea that, oh, it's really expensive and oh, it takes a lot of time to prep. Have any of you had these thoughts in your head like, oh man, I want to eat more plants, I want to be vegan, or I want to be more vegetarian, but it's a little pricey. Oh my gosh. Or hey, the prep time, I don't want to be in the kitchen cooking all the time. I'll get to your diabetes diet at the end. Thank you for the question. Can anyone relate? It happens a lot. That's one of the most common objections that comes up to me when I start working with people around plant-based eating. Sorry, it's really hot here and I'm like sweating profusely. All right, so when it comes to that, there's a couple areas and ways to look at this. So when it comes to the cost idea, in my opinion, we're always spending money on something, right? Whether it's food or drinks or clothes, or we're always spending money on something. And I like to ask people to look at the whole picture they're spending. Now, I'm not a financial advisor, but it's good to bring awareness to, hey, what other areas of your life are you spending money on that may not be serving you? And maybe that can just be allocated towards eating healthier because you know that's going to serve you in the long run, right? And then they can come to their own conclusions about that. They don't have to tell me where they're cutting their money, they're spending, but I like to ask them the question for them to reflect. And another thing is that, hey, there's a lot of options that actually are really cost effective, like canned foods, canned beans, right? Canned vegetables and or fruits, frozen veggies, frozen fruits, right? These things in bulk as well, right? Like there's so many other ways we can eat on a more efficient level. Like I often shop in bulk and I buy these things that are cheaper. I buy no name brand. There's little hacks, tips, and tricks that you can make it. If you're really concerned about the price, then you can make it. There's coupons. There's certain days that have sales. There's certain like local farmers markets in the summer, right? Support the local economy. There's so many different ways to do it. And when you look at the overall benefits you're getting, like I believe that's you're investing into your health. The cost of buying healthy food is an investment into your health, yourself, feeling better, right? Showing up better, knowing you're doing your future body a really good service. So for me, that investment is worth it. And I'm a type of person, I will spend so much money on my health because it's worth it for me, right? So that's a nice perspective shift, but there's also ways to save money for sure. And the second one that comes up is that people are like, oh, it's so time consuming. Oh my gosh, I want to just sit there, chop up veggies. And that is something, you know, we're cooking, whether we're eating plant-based or not, we're always making food. Well, for the most part, unless you order takeout a lot or unless you have a cook. If you do, that's pretty awesome. But we're always making food, preparing food. So there's ways to make that more efficient. And then also it's about being more prepared. Preparation is key. When you come home from work, when you end your workday for working at home and you haven't planned what to eat, yeah, you're looking at your fridge like, oh, what am I gonna make? Trying to put together meal ideas. And you're like, well, I'm just gonna either order takeout, eat this frozen meal, whatever it may be. But having preparation, if you know, like, okay, I'm gonna eat this and this, I have rice prepped, right? I have this cut up already and I have this prepped. Man, when I have this organized for myself, I can whip together a meal in like 10 minutes. And my secret to that is I pre-cook or pre-batch my grains and my proteins. So that looks like me cooking a bunch of rice or quinoa on the weekend. Or that looks like me batching my beans or my lentils or soaking my tofu or marinating it, right? And then throughout the week, I quickly throw things together, and veggies take no time to cook really. So I chop my veggies either before or fresh right there, really up to you. And then I throw everything together. I like one pot meals, super simple one pot meals, one pan meals, and I can whip up a meal in like 10 minutes. My roommate's like, how did you make that in 10 minutes? But so I had prep already. So if you're willing to put in like the hour or two on a certain day to have efficiency throughout the week, so again, time, your meal, and make it efficient and fun too. You can always combine your meal process with something.
Hi, Pearl. It looks as though we're kind of losing you just a little bit. I know that Pearl is joining in all the way in Nicaragua today, so she's freezing just a little bit on there. So we'll maybe just give her a quick moment just to maybe she can sign out and come back on to finish her chat. And also, in the meantime, while we're waiting for Pearl, in the meantime, I do want to say that we have found our second winner for our Yoga and Health Expo. I want to say a very special congratulations to Carly Sprague, all the way in Seattle, Washington. Congratulations. We will be DMing you to get all of your address info and get your prizes to you. All right, there she is. Pearl's back. We're going to put her back up so she can continue.
Sorry, guys. Sometimes the Wi-Fi here like just randomly cuts out. And it's a thing, but I'm back. I'm just gonna wrap up. I was just saying that we can really make that meal prepping experience more abundant and more fun. Now that's the recap. Just to do a quick refresher. I talked about the balanced plate model. I talked about the 80-20 rule and food guilt. I talked about ideas around making it more cost effective and making it more efficient for you to make and prep food for the week. Now we're almost done, but we'll answer a couple questions and then we can call it a day. So Banu asked, sorry if I said your name wrong, how can plant-based diet help vegetarians? Okay, so basically plant-based diet and vegetarian eating is the same thing, right? So plant-based diet, or plant-based eating is an umbrella term for various different diets or eating styles, and vegetarian goes under there. So basically how it can help, well, it depends on what your goals are and what you're looking for. But hey, it can really help you in a lot of ways in terms of nutrition, getting enough nutrients, your energy levels, like your skin, fiber, decreasing cholesterol levels, right? Balancing out any misalignments, not misalignments, but the word I'm looking for is not coming up. But making sure you're just getting adequate amount of things. It can be cost effective for you. Really depends on your goals. Can help you manage your weight better, right? I could go on and on, but there's a lot of things that can benefit you. And I think there was a question in the chat about diabetes, and I cannot dive into this exactly without knowing what's going on with your blood sugars. I used to work in diabetes. I used to love working in diabetes. I used to be a dietitian. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. And I worked at the hospital. I work with diabetes patients. They're my favorite patients. But when it comes to diabetes diet, the one thing I want you to remember, I don't want to call it diet because it's really not. It's more like a lifestyle, balancing your blood sugars. And really, ultimately, we should all be aiming to balance our blood sugars, right? And to do that is, again, thinking back your balance plate model. When I work with people in diabetes, we always just want to balance out their meals. So my suggestion for you is to think about making every meal balanced. So always having your carbs with your proteins, with your fiber, with your fats, even your snacks, okay? Always, always, always. For diabetics specifically, you don't want to eat any carbohydrates by itself. All right, so that's the one thing I wanted to really focus on. And just doing that can be so powerful. And then also just watching your carbohydrate portions, depending on how much you're eating. Again, can't give you specifics. Second really powerful thing when it comes to managing blood sugars is going for a walk or doing some movement after you eat, right? Whether it's 15, half an hour after you eat, you want to get some movement in there. And that's really, really effective for managing your blood sugar levels. So I hope that helped. All right, thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the questions. I hope that was helpful. If you have anything you want to ask, follow up, please DM me on Instagram. I'm always open to chat and to give more insights and knowledge from what I know from my experience. Thanks again for having me. I am so looking forward to the panel, and I'll talk to you guys really soon.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Pearl. She always makes it so much fun. So, Pearl, thank you so much for that. And again, thank you so much for always keeping us inspired and motivated to treat ourselves right, feed ourselves right, and get into our bodies. So, thank you so much. And again, as Pearl mentioned, you can follow her at Pearl Cicci, which we're going to type in the chat below. And she also has a link tree that will link you to all of the different resources that she has. And you can definitely check out her Reels challenge as well. I think she's still on her 30-day one. Are you still on the 30-day? You are? Yeah, I've been following along. It's been pretty awesome. So definitely check her out for some inspiration. Before